A stranger's baby wouldn't stop crying on the plane until she signed with her hands. The silence that followed wasn't just relief. It was recognition. What the woman didn't know, the man holding that child was more powerful than any mafia boss, and the language she just spoke had been dead for 300 years. The baby's scream cut through the cabin like a knife through silk. Mara Chin pressed her earbuds deeper, but it was useless. 3 rows ahead, a man in an expensive black coat was rocking an infant who seemed determined to wake every soul on Flight 447 from Seattle to Boston. The red-eye special. The quiet flight. The one she'd specifically chosen to grade her students' essays in peace.
So much for that plan.
Sir, please, a flight attendant whispered urgently. The other passengers are complaining. I'm trying, the man's voice was smooth, controlled, but there was an edge to it. Not anger. Something else. Desperation, maybe. He won't stop. The baby's cries intensified. Not the normal wail of a tired infant, but something raw.
Panicked.
Like the child was being torn apart from the inside. Mara pulled out her earbuds. Around her, passengers were grumbling, some calling for the flight attendant, others shooting death glares toward the man. An elderly woman 2 rows up actually hissed, "Can't you control your own child?" The man didn't respond. He just kept rocking the baby, his movements precise but increasingly stiff. His knuckles were white where they gripped the infant's blanket. Something was wrong. Mara had worked at Riverside School for the Deaf for 3 years as a teaching assistant. She knew the difference between a tantrum and genuine distress. This was distress. She unbuckled her seatbelt. "Ma'am, please remain seated," a flight attendant said as Mara stepped into the aisle. Just 1 second, Mara moved past her, approaching the man with the screaming baby. Up close, she could see his face, sharp features, pale skin despite the summer season, dark eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in days. Or weeks. The baby in his arms was maybe 6 months old, face red and soaked with tears. "Excuse me," Mara said softly. The man's head snapped toward her. For just a moment, his eyes flashed with something that made her breath catch. Not hostility, exactly. More like a predator assessing threat. Then it was gone, replaced by exhausted courtesy. "I'm sorry," he said. "We'll be quiet soon." "That's not." Mara hesitated. "Is your baby deaf?" The man went completely still. "What?" "The way he's crying. The overstimulation. I work with deaf children." She gestured carefully, keeping her hands visible and non-threatening. "May I?" For a long moment, the man just stared at her. The baby kept screaming. Around them, the cabin had gone quiet except for the child's cries and the drone of the engines. Everyone was watching now. Finally, the man gave a single sharp nod. Mara knelt in the aisle beside his seat. The baby's eyes were squeezed shut, his tiny fists clenched. She could see the rapid flutter of his heartbeat in his neck. Poor thing was terrified. Slowly, deliberately, she began to sign. Not ASL, American Sign Language. Something older. Something her grandmother had taught her during long summers in San Francisco's Chinatown, claiming it was a secret language passed down through their family. A language of touch and gesture that predated words. "Safe," she signed. "You are safe. Feel the ground beneath. Feel the stillness within." The baby's cries faltered. Mara kept going, her hands moving in fluid patterns. She touched her own chest, then gestured outward, showing the expansion and contraction of breath. Ancient signs her grandmother had insisted were more than just communication. They were connection. "I hear you without sound. I see you without words. You are not alone." The baby's eyes opened. They were the most unusual color Mara had ever seen, deep violet, almost black at the center, ringed with silver. Beautiful and impossible and fixed directly on her moving hands. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. The baby stopped crying. His tiny chest rose and fell with normal breaths. His hands unclenched. And he stared at Mara like she was the only real thing in the universe. Holy shit, someone whispered behind her. The man holding the baby looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His face had gone even paler, if that were possible, and his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his grip on the now quiet infant. How did you? He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. My grandmother taught me. Mara smiled at the baby, who was still watching her with those strange, intent eyes. She said it was an old family tradition for calming anxious children. Your grandmother. The man's voice was barely audible. What was her name? Sarah Chun. Well, Chunmei originally, but she went by Sarah after she moved too. Where did her family come from? Originally? The intensity in his question made Mara pull back slightly. Guangdong province, I think. But that was generations ago. Why does it? Thank you, the man cut her off, his tone suddenly formal. Remote. You've been very kind. I won't keep you from your seat. It was a dismissal. A polite one, but unmistakable. Mara stood slowly, confused. The baby made a small sound, not a cry, just a coo, and reached one tiny hand toward her. The man's arms tightened protectively. Right, Mara said. Glad I could help. She walked back to her seat under the stares of 40 passengers, her mind spinning. The man's reaction had been bizarre. And those questions about her grandmother. But the baby was quiet now. That was what mattered. She buckled her seatbelt and tried to return to her essays. 3 minutes later, she gave up and stared out the window instead, watching clouds drift past in the darkness. She didn't see the man watching her in the reflection of his phone screen, his expression unreadable. She didn't see him text a single message to someone, found one.
Chun bloodline.
Confirmed signs. What do I do? And she definitely didn't see the 2 passengers in row 12 exchange a glance and pull out their phones, typing identical messages to a different contact entirely. Target confirmed. Royal Air traveling. Intercept upon landing. The plane hummed through the night sky. The baby, finally at peace, slept with one small fist pressed against his father's chest. And Mara Chen tried very hard to ignore the feeling that her entire life had just tilted sideways into something she couldn't possibly understand. Not yet. Draven couldn't breathe. Not that he needed to. Breathing was more habit than necessity for someone like him, but the shock had locked his chest anyway. The woman had used the royal caretaker language. The actual language. Not an approximation, not a coincidence of similar gestures. She'd signed the threefold calming, a sequence so specific, so ancient, that only 5 people in recorded history had ever mastered it. And they were all dead. He'd watched them die himself 347 years ago, when the Hunter clans had burned the caretaker's hall to the ground. The screams still haunted him sometimes, in the rare moments when he let himself remember. The caretakers had been human, yes, but they'd been his people. Protectors of vampire children, guardians of the most vulnerable members of his kind. The slaughter had been complete, thorough, not a single survivor. Or so he'd thought. Draven looked down at Lysander, who slept peacefully for the first time in 3 days. His son's tiny face was relaxed, the constant tension finally released from his small body. Since the boy's mother had died in childbirth 2 months ago, taking with her the only other vampire who could naturally soothe him, Lysander had been inconsolable. Deaf vampire infants were rare. Perhaps 1 in every 1,000 births. They experienced the world differently, more intensely. Every vibration, every shift in air pressure, every pulse of living hearts around them became overwhelming without proper guidance. Without a caretaker who knew the old ways. Draven had been traveling to Boston to meet with a council of elders, hoping they might know of some ancient text, some forgotten solution. Instead, this human woman named Mara Chen, had appeared out of nowhere and solved a problem he'd thought unsolvable.
Chenmei. He knew that name.
It was in the records in the bloodline archives kept in the Obsidian Citadel. The Chen family had served the Eastern vampire courts for generations before the massacre. One daughter had been traveling abroad when the attack happened, had survived, had disappeared into human society. This woman was her descendant. Had to be. Which meant the knowledge hadn't died after all. It had simply hidden, passed down through whispers and grandmother's stories, waiting. But waiting for what? Draven shifted in his seat, careful not to wake Lysander. For Ro's back, Mara Chun was bent over a stack of papers, red pen moving across them in quick, efficient strokes. She looked so ordinary. Jeans, a faded Stanford sweatshirt, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Mid-20s, maybe. Definitely not someone who looked like she carried the genetic memory of vampire caretaker techniques. She glanced up suddenly, as if sensing his attention. Their eyes met for a brief second before she looked away, a small frown creasing her forehead. She had no idea what she'd done. No concept of the magnitude. That was dangerous. For her and for Lysander. Draven pulled out his phone, keeping the screen tilted away from prying eyes. The message he'd sent earlier had 3 responses now.
Marcus, impossible.
Chun line went extinct. Celine, if true, bring her in immediately. Council must verify. Victor, don't trust it. Could be a trap. Hunters have been probing our defenses for months. Victor's paranoia was warranted, but wrong. Draven had seen the genuine confusion on Mara's face when Lysander responded to her signs. She hadn't known what would happen. Hadn't expected it. Real hunters would have known. Would have been prepared. Still, he composed a careful response. Will observe. Making contact after landing. Keep this contained. He hit send and immediately deleted the entire conversation thread. Old habits from centuries of hiding in plain sight. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Around them, passengers began stirring, stretching, making the small movements of people on a long flight. Draven stayed perfectly still, his enhanced hearing picking up conversations throughout the cabin. Row 8. Never seen anything like it. 1 second screaming, the next. Row 12. Definitely the air mark. Right eye, silver ring. Draven's attention sharpened on row 12. 2 men, mid-40s, both wearing dark jackets despite the warm cabin temperature. He'd clocked them during boarding, something off about their heartbeats, too controlled, too steady. He dismissed it as nervous flyers. Now one of them was talking about an air mark. Very few humans knew about air marks. The royal birthmark that appeared in a ring around a vampire heir's pupil, visible only under certain light conditions. Hunters knew. Draven adjusted his position slightly, angling himself so he could watch them in the reflection of the darkened window. The one on the aisle had his phone out, showing something to his companion. The screen was angled away, but Draven caught a glimpse of text, confirmed royal bloodline. Child is vulnerable. His blood went cold, metaphorically speaking. They'd been made. Somehow, despite his precautions, despite traveling under a false identity and suppressing his aura, these hunters had identified them. Which meant landing in Boston just became exponentially more complicated. Lysander stirred against his chest, making a small sound. Draven immediately placed one hand against his son's back, feeling the rapid flutter of the infant's heartbeat. Still asleep, but restless. They had maybe another hour before the child would wake and need attention again. Another hour before he'd start crying and draw even more attention. Unless. Draven looked at Mara Chun again. She was the solution to multiple problems. But approaching her meant revealing himself, at least partially. Meant trusting a stranger with secrets that could destroy them both. But keeping his distance meant Lysander would suffer. Meant those hunters in row 12 would have an easier time tracking a screaming infant through a crowded airport. It wasn't really a choice at all. Draven pulled out his phone again and typed a new message, not to his vampire contacts, but to a local number. A safe house in Cambridge, one he maintained under another identity. Prepare guest accommodations. 2 humans, 1 infant. High security. Tonight. The die was cast. Now, he just had to figure out how to convince Mara-chan to trust him enough to follow a stranger into the night, while staying ahead of hunters who'd already marked them for death. The plane touched down at Logan International at 11:47 p.m. Mara gathered her papers, shoving them into her messenger bag with less care than usual. She was exhausted. The adrenaline from the baby incident had worn off, leaving her jittery and unfocused. All she wanted was to catch a lift home, collapse into bed, and forget this weird night had ever happened. She stood when the seatbelt sign dinged off, reaching for her carry-on in the overhead compartment. "Excuse me, Miss Chen." She turned. The man with the baby stood in the aisle, the infant tucked securely against his shoulder. Up close, he was taller than she'd realized, at least 6'2", with a presence that made the narrow cabin feel even smaller. The baby was awake now, those strange violet eyes watching her with unsettling focus. "Yes. I wanted to properly thank you." His voice was different now. Formal, almost old-fashioned in its precision. "What you did was extraordinary."
I'm Draven.
Draven Ashford. He extended his free hand. Mara shook it briefly, trying not to notice how cold his skin felt. "Just the airplane AC, probably." "It's fine, really. I'm glad I could help." She smiled at the baby. "He's beautiful." "What's his name?" "Lysander." Draven's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "He's been difficult since his mother passed." Nothing seemed to comfort him until he trailed off, but the implication was clear. "Until you." "I'm so sorry for your loss," Mara said quietly. The line of passengers behind them was growing restless, people shuffling and sighing. "Listen, I should probably. Would you have dinner with us? Tomorrow evening?" The question came out rushed, almost desperate. Then Draven seemed to catch himself, his composure sliding back into place. "To thank you properly. I'm staying in Cambridge temporarily. There's an excellent restaurant near Harvard Square." "My treat, of course." Mara hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this was weird. You didn't have dinner with random men you met on airplanes, no matter how cute their babies were or how politely they asked. But something about the way Lysander was looking at her, those impossible eyes so intent and trusting, made her pause. "I don't know," she said finally. "I'm pretty busy with work." "Please." Draven's voice dropped lower. "Lysander needs, that is, I would be grateful for any advice you might have. About his condition. You clearly have experience that I lack." The baby chose that moment to reach out one tiny hand toward Mara. Not crying, just
Seeking. Damn it.
"Okay," she heard herself say. "Tomorrow. But somewhere public, and I'm driving myself." Relief flashed across Draven's face. "Of course. I'll text you the details. Your number?" They exchanged phones, entering contact information while the passenger behind them made an exaggerated throat-clearing sound. Mara grabbed her bag and squeezed past them, joining the slow shuffle toward the exit. She didn't look back. But if she had, she might have seen Draven's expression shift from relief to alertness as he glanced toward row 12, where two men were standing with unusual patience, making no move to retrieve their luggage. The terminal was chaos. Friday night arrivals, families reuniting, business travelers speedwalking toward ground transportation. Mara wove through the crowd, heading for the rideshare pickup area. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Harvest Moon Restaurant. 7 p.m. "Thank you again."
Da.
She was about to reply when someone bumped into her from behind.
Hard.
"Sorry," a male voice said. But when Mara turned, the man was already walking away, tall, dark jacket, moving with purpose toward the baggage claim. Something cold slithered down her spine. That hadn't felt accidental. She clutched her bag tighter and kept walking, faster now. The exit was just ahead, automatic doors leading to the cool night air and the relative safety of. "Excuse me, miss." Another man, this one directly in her path. Also wearing a dark jacket. 40s, bland features, the kind of face you'd forget immediately. Except his eyes. They were too focused, too calculating. Yes, Mara said, trying to step around him. He moved to block her. You were sitting in row 7, correct? On flight 447. Every hair on the back of her neck stood up. Why are you asking? Simple question, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Did you notice anything unusual about the passenger in row 4? The man with the infant. I don't know what you're talking about. Mara's heart was hammering now. Excuse me. She pushed past him, walking fast toward the doors. Behind her, she heard him say something into a phone. She spooked. Moving to exit B. Oh God. Mara broke into a jog, dodging travelers and luggage carts. The exit was 20 feet away. 15. 10. A hand caught her elbow. Mara Chun, Draven's voice, quiet and urgent. He'd appeared out of nowhere, Lysander still secured against his chest in some kind of wrap carrier.
Don't react.
Don't look behind us. Those men are following you. I know, she hissed. What the hell is going on? Not here, his grip tightened fractionally. I have a car in the garage. Level 3. We need to move.
Now.
I'm not going anywhere with you. I don't even know. They think you're connected to me. To Lysander, Draven's voice was absolutely level, but his eyes were intense. Which means they'll hurt you to get to us. I can protect you, but only if you trust me for the next 5 minutes. After that, you can call the police, run away, whatever you want. But right now, we move. Together. Mara's mind raced. The man who'd questioned her was pushing through the crowd now, his companion emerging from another direction. Flanking positions. She looked at Draven, at the baby in his arms, watching her with those trusting, impossible eyes. 5 minutes, she said. 5 minutes, he agreed. They ran. The apartment was nothing like Mara expected. She'd imagined something temporary, a cramped Airbnb with IKEA furniture and generic art on the walls. Instead, Draven's rental was a spacious loft in Cambridge with exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the kind of elegant minimalism that screamed money. Old money. You can put your bag anywhere, Draven said, locking the door behind them. 3 locks, Mara noticed. Heavy-duty ones. Would you like water?
Yeah.
Answers. Mara stayed near the door, arms crossed. I want answers.
Who were those men?
Why were they following us? And don't tell me you don't know, because you clearly do. Draven set Lysander down an expensive-looking playpen near the windows. The baby immediately reached for a soft toy, content for the moment. Then Draven turned to face her, and something in his posture changed. Became more formal, almost regal. You're right, he said quietly. I do know. But before I explain, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, insane even. But I swear on my son's life that every word is true. Mara's stomach dropped. Oh God. You're in witness protection, aren't you? Or running from some kind of mob. Nothing so mundane. A ghost of a smile crossed his face.
Please sit.
This will take a few minutes. Against her better judgment, Mara perched on the edge of an armchair. Draven remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back like some kind of military officer. Those men at the airport are hunters, he began. Members of an organization that has existed for over 1,000 years. Their sole purpose is to track and eliminate what they consider threats to humanity. Threats, Mara repeated slowly. You mean like terrorists? I mean like vampires. The word hung in the air between them. Mara waited for the punchline, the just kidding, the indication that this was some elaborate joke. It never came. You're insane, she said finally. Am I? Draven moved with impossible speed, one moment across the room, the next standing directly in front of her. Mara's breath caught. She hadn't even seen him move. Your grandmother taught you the threefold calming. A technique that shouldn't exist anymore, that only vampire caretakers knew. How do you explain that? Family tradition. Cultural heritage. I don't know. Mara stood up, backing away. That doesn't mean vampires are real. It means my grandmother knew some old signing techniques. Watch. Draven held up one hand. Then, deliberately, he pressed a letter opener against his palm and drew it across the skin. Blood welled up, dark and red. Mara gasped. But before she could speak, the wound began to close. In seconds, the skin knitted itself back together until no trace of the cut remained. "Parlor trick," Mara whispered, but her voice shook. "Magicians do that all the time." "Your heart rate just spiked to 140 beats per minute." Draven tilted his head slightly. "You're breathing in short, shallow gasps. Fight or flight response. Your body knows the truth even if your mind resists it." He was right. Mara could feel her pulse hammering, her hands trembling. This wasn't possible. Couldn't be possible. But she'd also seen him move faster than physics should allow. Seen his wound heal in seconds. And those men at the airport, the way they'd moved, the focused intensity, they'd been hunting something.
Someone.
"Lysander," she said suddenly. "He's half vampire." His mother was human. Draven's expression softened when he looked at his son. "He has all the vulnerabilities of a vampire infant, the sensory overload, the need for careful guidance, but none of the typical soothing responses work. He's deaf in a way that makes the vampire world even more overwhelming." Mara sank back into the chair, her mind spinning. "The signs I used. My grandmother said they were for calming anxious children." They were. Vampire children specifically. Draven moved to the playpen, running a gentle hand over Lysander's dark hair. 3 centuries ago, there were human families who served as caretakers for our kind. They were honored, protected, considered part of vampire society. Your ancestor, Chunmei, was one of them. Was, Mara echoed. The hunters found the caretaker's hall in 1677. They burned it to the ground. His voice went flat. Everyone inside died. I thought the knowledge died with them. But Chunmei was traveling that night, visiting family in Guangdong.
She survived.
And, apparently, she passed down what she knew. Mara's throat was tight. My grandmother never said anything about vampires. She just taught me the signs. Said they were important, that I should remember them. She was protecting you. If the hunters knew any caretaker bloodline still existed, Draven turned back to her. What happened at the airport proves they're watching. They saw you calm Lysander. Saw him respond to you in a way he shouldn't respond to ordinary humans.
So they think I'm… what?
A threat. A connection. A way to get to us. He paused.
I'm sorry, Mara.
I didn't mean to endanger you. But now that you're involved, I can't simply walk away. Those hunters won't stop. They'll research you, follow you, wait for another opportunity. To do what? To use you as leverage. Or eliminate you as a potential ally to my kind. His voice was gentle but firm. Either way, you're safer here tonight. Tomorrow, in daylight, we can figure out next steps. I can arrange protection, relocation if necessary. I have a job. A life. Mara's voice rose. I can't just disappear because you think some vampire hunters are after me. Lysander made a distressed sound. Both adults immediately looked at him. The baby's face was scrunching up, the precursor to tears. Without thinking, Mara moved to the playpen. Her hands began signing automatically, the calming sequence, the signs for safety and comfort. Lysander's eyes fixed on her movements, and the distress faded. Draven watched silently. He needs you, he said finally. Not because I'm forcing this, but because you're the only person since his mother who can reach him. I won't compel you to stay. But I'm asking. Please. Just for tonight. Let me explain everything, answer your questions. Then, if you want to leave, I'll arrange the best protection I can and let you go. Mara looked at the baby, who was watching her with absolute trust. Just tonight, she heard herself say. Draven nodded. Just tonight. But they both knew it was already more than that. Mara sat on the couch with a cup of tea she hadn't touched, watching Draven move around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. He changed out of his travel clothes into dark slacks and a charcoal sweater, looking less like a desperate father and more like someone from a cologne advertisement. A vampire from a cologne advertisement. God, her life had gotten weird. You can ask, Draven said without turning around. Whatever questions you have. I'll answer truthfully. How old are you? 473. He said it the way someone else might say 35. I was born in 1552, in what's now Romania. Turned in 1570, 1 inch. Mara's brain stuttered over the math. You're older than America. By quite a bit, yes. He brought over a bottle of water for himself and sat in the chair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. Though I've lived in the States since 1823. Boston primarily, with time in New York and San Francisco. San Francisco, Mara's breath caught. My grandmother lived in San Francisco. I know. The Chun family settled there in 1889. I kept distant watch, making sure the bloodline was safe, unharmed by hunters. But I never made contact. It seemed cruel to burden them with a history they'd escaped. But you knew. All this time, you knew my family was, what, special. Carriers of sacred knowledge. Draven's expression grew distant. The caretakers weren't servants, Mara. They were essential. Vampire infants are born with heightened senses, no emotional regulation, and instincts they can't control. Without proper guidance, they can die. Or worse, become feral. Feral, Mara repeated weakly. Lost to bloodlust. Unable to think, to reason. Just predators. He glanced at Lysander, who was drowsing in the playpen. The caretakers knew how to ground them. The signs you used, they're not just calming techniques. They're a language that speaks directly to a vampire child's nervous system. Touch, rhythm, intentional movement. It bypasses conscious thought. Mara finally took a sip of tea. It had gone lukewarm. My grandmother used to say the signs were about showing children they're not alone in the silence. I thought she meant deaf kids in general. She did. But she also meant vampire children specifically. Draven leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Chunmei saw no difference. Deaf, vampire, human. They were all children who needed understanding. That philosophy made the caretakers invaluable. You talk about them like you knew them. I did. His voice went quiet. My younger sister had a caretaker named Elise. Human woman, maybe 25 years old, with red hair and a laugh like bells. She took care of my sister for 3 years until he stopped, jaw tightening. The fire, Mara finished softly. The hunters chose a night when most of the vampire court was away on diplomatic business. They locked the doors from outside and set the building ablaze. The caretakers were trapped. We found their bodies in the morning, clustered around the children they tried to protect. Mara's chest ached. I'm so sorry. It was a long time ago, but his eyes said otherwise. I've spent 3 centuries making sure it never happens again. Building alliances, monitoring hunter organizations, keeping my people safe. And then Lysander was born, and I realized he looked at his son. I realized I had no idea how to care for him properly. His mother tried, but she was human, and she died before she could learn enough. I was failing him. You're not failing him, Mara said automatically. You got on a plane and traveled across the country looking for help. That's not failing. I was going to Boston to beg ancient vampires for scraps of lost knowledge, a bitter smile. And instead, the knowledge found me. Found him. Do you understand how impossible that is? The probability of you being on that specific flight, in that specific seat. Coincidence. I stopped believing in coincidence around 1650, Draven stood, moving to the window. Your grandmother knew you'd need those signs someday. She must have. Why else insist you learn them, practice them until they were instinctive? Mara thought about those long summer afternoons, her grandmother's patient hands guiding hers through the sequences. Again, Mara. Until your hands remember, without thinking. These signs are our family's gift. She never told me about vampires, Mara said. Never even hinted. Would you have believed her? Fair point. What happens now? Mara asked. You said the hunters saw me with Lysander. What does that mean for me? Draven was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know. If they identify you as Chin bloodline, they'll watch you.
Follow you.
They may try to use you as bait to draw me out. Or they may decide you're too dangerous to live, a potential caretaker who could strengthen vampire society. That's insane. I'm a teaching assistant. I grade papers and help kids learn to read. I'm not some vampire secret weapon. You calmed a royal heir with 3 gestures. Draven turned to face her. Do you know what that means politically? The vampire world has spent 3 centuries without caretakers. Heirs are raised poorly, their education fragmented. Many grow up unstable, violent. The noble houses fight constantly because no one remembers how to properly guide the next generation. And you think I can change that? I think you already have. By helping Lysander, you've proven the old ways survived. That knowledge can be relearned. His eyes were intense. The council will want to meet you. Other vampire families will seek you out. And the hunters will do everything in their power to prevent that. Mara's head was spinning. This is too much. This morning I was worried about lesson plans and student evaluations. Now you're telling me I'm some kind of living historical artifact. You're not an artifact. You're a person with an extraordinary gift. Draven's voice softened. And I'm not asking you to become something you're not. But I am asking you to stay safe. At least until we know what the hunters plan to do. How long? A few days. Maybe a week. I have work on Monday. Call in sick. I can't just. Lysander whimpered. Both adults froze. The baby was stirring, his face scrunching with discomfort. Mara watched as Draven moved to the playpen with supernatural speed, scooping up his son with practiced care. But Lysander kept fussing, small cries building. Without thinking, Mara crossed the room. She held out her hands, and Draven, after a brief hesitation, passed the baby to her. Immediately, she began signing. Safe.
Warm.
Protected. Your father is here. I am here. You're loved. Lysander's cries faded. His tiny hand reached up, brushing against her fingers as they moved. And then he smiled, a real, genuine smile that made Mara's heart crack open. Oh, she whispered. Draven was watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. He's never smiled like that before. Not for anyone. Mara looked down at the baby in her arms, at his impossible violet eyes and the complete trust written there. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, I'll stay.
For now.
Until we figure this out, she met Draven's gaze. But I'm not doing this just because of vampire politics or hunter threats. I'm doing it for him. Because he needs help, and apparently I can give it. Something in Draven's expression shifted. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. Thank you, he said simply. Lysander yawned, snuggling against Mara's chest. And somewhere across the city, in a nondescript office building, 2 hunters marked a file with a single word. Confirmed. The explosion of glass came at 2:47 a.m. Mara jerked awake on the couch where she'd fallen asleep, her heart hammering. For a disoriented second, she thought she'd dreamed it. Then she heard Draven's voice, sharp and commanding from the bedroom. Stay with Lysander. Don't come out. She was on her feet before she'd fully processed the words, stumbling toward the nursery alcove where Lysander slept in a converted closet. The baby was awake, eyes wide but not crying yet. Mara scooped him up just as another crash echoed through the apartment. Someone was inside. Draven, she called, keeping her voice low. No answer. Mara's hands moved automatically, signing the calming sequence while her mind raced. The bedroom door was closed. She could hear sounds behind it, thuds, grunts, the scrape of furniture being moved. Fighting.
She needed to get out.
But the apartment's front door was past the bedroom, past whatever was happening in there. The window. Could she? The bedroom door exploded outward. A man stumbled through, not Draven. Tall, muscular, wearing tactical gear and holding something that looked like a silver blade. His eyes locked onto Mara with predatory focus. There, he said into a radio. I have the caretaker and the heir. Mara backed toward the window, clutching Lysander. Stay away from us. Hand over the child. You don't have to die tonight, Miss Chen. Not happening. The hunter took a step forward, then stopped, his expression shifting to confusion. He looked down at his chest, where a hand had emerged, impossibly, from behind, fingers curved like claws. Draven's hand. Wrong answer, Draven said coldly. He moved so fast Mara's eyes couldn't track it. One moment the hunter was standing, the next he was on the ground, unconscious or worse. Draven straightened, and Mara saw blood on his shirt, his own, from a wound in his side that was already healing. There are more, he said tersely. At least 3 outside. They must have been watching, waiting until they thought I was vulnerable. Are you? I'll heal. But I can't fight them all and protect you both. His eyes met hers. We need to leave.
Now.
There's a fire escape outside the far window. Another crash, this time from the front door. Heavy boots on hardwood. Ashford, a voice called. We have the building surrounded. Send out the woman and child. This doesn't have to get messy, eh? Draven moved to Mara's side, his voice dropping to a whisper. When I say run, you take Lysander and go down the fire escape. Turn left at the alley, then right on Mass Avenue. There's a 24-hour diner called the Blue Star. Go inside and wait. What about you? I'll hold them off and catch up. He was already moving toward the bedroom, grabbing a leather jacket. They can hurt me, but they can't kill me easily. You and Lysander are fragile. You're the priority. Draven. 2 hunters emerged from the hallway, both armed with those silver blades. Draven's entire demeanor changed, became something ancient and terrifying. His eyes darkened to pure black, and when he smiled, Mara saw fangs. Run, he said.
Mara ran.
She sprinted to the window, threw it open with one hand while holding Lysander with the other. The fire escape was old metal, rusted and rickety.
She didn't care.
Behind her, she heard fighting, the crash of bodies, breaking furniture, a scream cut short. Don't look back. Just move. She clambered onto the fire escape, Lysander clutched against her chest. The baby was making distressed sounds, picking up on her fear. Mara forced herself to breathe slowly, her hands signing against his back even as she climbed down.
Safe.
Moving but safe.
Trust me.
I have you. 2 flights down. 3. The alley was dark, smelling of garbage and old rain. Mara hit the ground and ran left, just as Draven had said. Behind her, something heavy crashed out of a different window. She glanced back, a hunter, taking a shortcut. He hit the ground in a crouch, completely unharmed by the 3-story fall. Oh God. Mara pushed herself faster, her lungs burning. Lysander was surprisingly heavy for an infant. Her arms ached. The alleys seemed to stretch forever. Right on Mass Avenue. The diner should be there. Blue neon sign. Half the letters burned out. The Blue Star. She burst through the door, startling the elderly waitress behind the counter. Please, Mara gasped. Someone's following me. I need. The waitress's expression shifted immediately. She came around the counter, ushering Mara toward the back. Booth in the corner. Sit with your back to the wall. Mara obeyed, sliding into the worn vinyl seat. Through the window, she could see the hunter from the alley standing at the entrance to the alley, scanning the street. He was talking into his radio. You know Draven? Mara whispered. Everyone in the community knows the Ashford name, the waitress. Her name tag said Dolores, poured coffee into a mug.
Drink.
You look like hell. The baby okay? Mara looked down. Lysander was staring at her with those intense eyes, but he wasn't crying. Her hands were still moving through the signs, muscle memory taking over. He's okay, she said shakily. Draven said he'd catch up.
He will.
Man's 4 centuries old. Takes more than a few hunters to put him down. Before Mara could process the fact that apparently random diner waitresses knew about vampires, the door chimed. Draven walked in. He looked like he'd been through a war. His shirt was torn and blood-stained, his face had a cut that was still healing, and he was limping slightly. but he was alive, moving, and when he saw them in the booth, relief flooded his features. "You made it," he said, sliding in across from them. "3 of them?" Dolores asked, pouring him coffee he wouldn't drink.
4.
One was waiting in the stairwell. Draven's eyes never left Mara and Lysander. "They're dealt with, but more will come. They know where I'm staying now." "So, what do we do?" Mara asked. Draven was quiet for a moment, his hand resting on the table. Without thinking, Mara reached out and placed her free hand over his. He looked startled, then grateful. "We disappear," he said finally. "I have resources, safe houses they don't know about. We leave Boston tonight. Drive south, maybe. Change our identities, lay low until—"
No, Mara unteraptid.
Both Draven and Dolores looked at her in surprise. "No running," Mara said firmly. "You said there's a vampire council. People who would want to know about me, about what I can do.
So we go to them.
We go to your people, and we make this official. We stop hiding and we stand in the open where the hunters can't just pick us off in the dark." "The council is in the Obsidian Citadel," Draven said slowly. "That's not exactly a safe place for a human. Safer than a fire escape at 3 a.m. Mara looked at Lysander, who was finally drowsing against her shoulder. "He deserves better than running. And if what you said is true, if I really am the last of the caretaker bloodline, then maybe it's time your people knew I exist." Draven studied her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled. "You sound like Chen Mei. She never backed down from a fight either. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes," he stood, wincing slightly. "But we leave now, before they regroup." Dolores slid a set of keys across the table. "Black sedan, back parking lot. Tank's full. Don't bring it back shot full of holes." "Thank you, Del." "Thank the girl. She's got spine." Dolores winked at Mara. "Good luck, honey. You're gonna need it." 10 minutes later, they were on I-95 heading south, the city lights fading behind them. Lysander slept peacefully in his car seat. And Mara wondered what the hell she'd just agreed to. The old cathedral looked abandoned. Mara stood in the pre-dawn darkness, staring up at the crumbling stone facade somewhere in rural Connecticut. Draven had driven for 3 hours in silence, finally pulling off the highway onto progressively smaller roads until they'd reached this forgotten place. "This is where your council meets?" she asked skeptically.
No.
"This is where the truth is kept." Draven pulled Lysander from the car seat, the baby still drowsy and content. "The Citadel is in Virginia. But before we go there, before I introduce you to politics and power plays, I want you to see something. To understand what you're walking into." He led them around the side of the building to a door so weathered it seemed part of the stone itself. Draven pressed his palm against it, and Mara heard mechanisms clicking, electronic locks disguised as ancient wood. The door swung open. Inside, stone steps spiraled downward into darkness. Draven produced a flashlight from somewhere, illuminating the descent. The air smelled of age and secrets. "Stay close," he said quietly. They went down.
And down.
The stairs seemed endless, cutting deep into the earth until Mara's legs burned and her ears popped from the pressure change. Finally, they reached the bottom. Draven touched something on the wall, and lights flickered on. Not electric, but some kind of phosphorescent crystal embedded in the stone. The glow revealed a massive underground chamber. Mara's breath caught. The walls were covered in murals. Hundreds of them, stretching up toward a vaulted ceiling, painted in colors that still looked fresh despite obvious age. They depicted scenes of humans and vampires together, not in violence, but in partnership. Humans cradling vampire infants, their hands forming familiar signs. Vampires and humans sharing meals, walking gardens, teaching children together. "The Archive of the Covenant," Draven said softly. "Built in 1203 by the First Vampire-Human Alliance. This is what we were, Mara. Before the fear. Before the hunts." Mara walked forward slowly, Lysander stirring in her arms. The detail in the murals was extraordinary. She could see the expressions on painted faces, the tenderness, the trust. In one scene, a human woman held a vampire child who was clearly distressed, her hands positioned in the threefold calming. "My grandmother's signs," Mara whispered. "Your ancestors' signs," Draven corrected. "Look here." He'd stopped before a particular mural, larger than the others. It showed a ceremony of some kind, vampires in formal robes standing in a circle around a human woman who held an infant. The woman wore a pendant, clearly visible even in the ancient painting. A circular design with intricate knotwork. Mara's hand went to her throat. She'd worn that pendant this morning. Had worn it every day since her grandmother died, a simple inheritance she'd thought was just a family heirloom. She'd left it at her apartment when they fled, but she knew every curve and line of it.
"That's impossible," she said.
"It's your bloodline." Draven moved closer to the mural, his finger tracing the air near the painted woman's face.
10 mei, 1677.
This was painted just months before the massacre. She's holding the heir to the Eastern courts, a girl named Celestine who would have been queen if she'd survived. Mara felt dizzy. The woman in the painting had her grandmother's eyes. Or maybe Mara had the painted woman's eyes. It was impossible to tell where the past ended and the present began. How do you know it's her? Mara asked. The pendant. Each caretaker family had a unique design, passed down through generations. The Chun pendant was always knotwork and crescent moons. He glanced at her. You said you inherited one from your grandmother. Yes, but Mara's mind was reeling. This could be coincidence. Similar designs. Look at the inscription. Mara moved closer. At the bottom of the mural, in elegant script, were words in multiple languages. English, Latin, Chinese characters. She focused on the Chinese, her grandmother's first language.
陈美，寂静者的守护者，她的血脉将延续，即使在黑暗中。
Chun Mei, guardian of the silent ones. Her bloodline will endure, even in darkness. Even in darkness, Mara repeated. Her voice cracked.
She knew.
When she ran, when she hid in human society, she knew someday we'd be needed again. She preserved the knowledge in the only way she could. Hidden in plain sight, disguised as family tradition, Draven's expression was solemn. The hunters thought they'd eliminated the caretakers. But they only scattered them. Lysander made a small sound. Mara looked down to find him awake, his violet eyes fixed on the murals. His tiny hand reached out, fingers splaying toward the painted figures. He can see them, Draven said, wonder in his voice. He understands somehow. Mara walked slowly through the chamber, taking in more murals. Some showed caretakers teaching vampire children to read. Others depicted medical care, play, celebration. In every image, the bond between human and vampire was clear, not servitude, but mutual respect. What happened? She asked. Why did it end?
Fear.
Misunderstanding. A vampire noble murdered a human lord's daughter in 1645, and it sparked a war. The humans couldn't fight vampires directly, so they targeted what we valued most. Draven's jaw tightened. Our children. Our caretakers. The hunters burned the halls, killed anyone connected to vampire society. We retaliated. For 50 years, it was bloodshed and horror. And the caretakers were caught in the middle. They tried to broker peace. Failed. He touched the wall gently. This archive was sealed to protect it. Only a few vampires in each generation know it exists. The council believes the caretaker knowledge is lost forever. But you're taking me to them anyway. Because you're proof it's not lost. Proof we can reclaim what we were. Draven turned to face her fully. Mara, I need you to understand what you're walking into. The council is divided. Some will see you as hope. Others will see you as a threat, a human with influence over vampire heirs, including the future king. There will be those who want to use you, some who want to control you, and a few who will want you dead. Comforting, Mara said dryly. I won't let anything happen to you. Or to Lysander, his voice was firm. But I need you to know the risks. Once we go to the Citadel, once they know you exist, there's no going back to your normal life. You'll be part of this world, for better or worse. Mara looked at the baby in her arms, then back at the murals. At the painted woman who wore her face, who'd fled into darkness, carrying knowledge she'd believed was worth preserving. My grandmother used to tell me a story, Mara said quietly, about a woman who carried a light through a long tunnel. She didn't know where the tunnel led, didn't know if anyone would see her light. But she carried it anyway, because someone had to remember the sun. She met Draven's eyes. I think I understand now what she meant. This knowledge, these signs, they're the light. And maybe it's my turn to carry them. Draven was quiet for a long moment. Then he bowed, a formal gesture that seemed to come from centuries of practice. Guardian of the silent air, he said softly. Welcome home. Above them, the painted faces seemed to watch with approval. And Lysander, cradled against Mara's heart, reached out one small hand and touched her cheek, a gesture that needed no translation. Trust. Connection. Family. The drive to Virginia would take another 6 hours. But for the first time since that airplane crash shattered her normal life, Mara felt like she was moving towards something instead of running away. The safe house was a converted farmhouse in rural Virginia, still 2 hours from the Obsidian Citadel. We'll rest here for a day, Draven had said when they arrived at sunset. Let you adjust before the council meeting. Now, 3 days later, Mara understood he'd been giving her time for something else entirely. She woke on the third morning with tears on her face and a lullaby on her lips, words in a language she didn't speak, had never learned. The melody was ancient, haunting, and she knew instinctively it was meant for vampire children. Knew the exact rhythm to rock while singing, the hand movements to accompany each verse. She sat up in bed, her heart racing. Not again, she whispered. It had started the second night. Small things at first, the knowledge of how to prepare a specific herbal tea that would help Lysander sleep more deeply. The instinct to touch his forehead in a particular pattern that regulated his overwhelmed senses. Mara had dismissed it as stress, or maybe osmosis from watching Draven care for his son. But this morning, she'd woken with complete, detailed memories of feeding rituals for vampire infants. How to warm blood to the precise temperature. Which herbs to add for nutrition. The prayers, actual prayers, to speak while preparing each meal. Memories that weren't hers. Mara found Draven in the kitchen, already awake despite the early hour. Lysander was in a bassinet nearby, watching dust motes dance in the morning light. I need to ask you something, Mara said without preamble. Is it possible for memories to be inherited? Passed down genetically? Draven looked up from his coffee, his expression carefully neutral. Why do you ask? Because I keep knowing things I shouldn't know. Last night I prepared Lysander's bottle exactly right, the temperature, the mixture, without anyone teaching me. And this morning I woke up singing a lullaby in what I think is medieval Romanian. Draven set down his cup. I wondered when this would begin. When what would begin? Memory echoes. Not reincarnation, he added quickly, seeing her alarm. You're not becoming someone else. But the caretaker bond is more than learned knowledge. It's encoded. Epigenetic inheritance combined with something we don't fully understand. When a caretaker bloodline awakens, the ancestral knowledge surfaces. Mara sank into a chair. So, I'm remembering things my ancestors did. Experiencing echoes of their skills, yes. It's strongest with physical tasks, muscle memory, instinctive responses. You won't suddenly remember conversations or personal details. But the craft of caretaking? That comes back. He studied her carefully. Is it frightening? I don't know. Yes. Maybe. Mara rubbed her face. I keep having moments where my hands move on their own. Where I just know what to do for Lysander without thinking. It feels like I'm sharing my body with someone else. You're sharing knowledge, not consciousness. Your grandmother carried these same echoes. She likely experienced them when you were born, watching her daughter raise you. The bloodline remembers. Lysander made a sound. Without thinking, Mara went to him, her hands already forming soothing patterns in the air. The baby's eyes tracked her movements, his small face relaxing. See, Draven said softly. That's not someone else moving your hands. That's you, accessing inherited skill.
Like
Musical talent or athletic ability, but more specific. This is so weird. Welcome to Vampire Society. Weird is our baseline. Despite everything, Mara smiled. Over the past 3 days, she'd seen different sides of Draven. Not just the desperate father or the ancient king, but someone who made dry jokes and knew how to cook breakfast and read bedtime stories to his son in 4 different languages. She lifted Lysander from the bassinet, and the baby immediately snuggled against her shoulder. The gesture felt right in a way that transcended normal bonding. There's something else, Mara said. When I hold him, I can almost feel what he's feeling. Not thoughts exactly, but emotions. When he's uncomfortable or content or scared. The empathic bond. All caretakers developed it. Draven moved closer, watching them. It's how they knew what the children needed before the children could communicate it. With deaf vampire infants especially, that bond was essential. Will it get stronger? Probably. The more time you spend with him, the deeper the connection becomes. He paused. Does it bother you? Mara considered. The logical part of her brain said yes, this should be terrifying. Genetic memories, empathic bonds, ancient knowledge surfacing unbidden. But holding Lysander, feeling his contentment, the fear seemed distant. No, she said honestly. It feels
right.
Like I'm becoming who I was always meant to be. Something shifted in Draven's expression. Your grandmother would be proud. I wish she'd told me. Prepared me. She protected you. If you'd known about vampires, about your heritage, you might have sought us out. Or the hunters might have found you. He touched Lysander's dark hair gently. Sometimes love means letting someone live in ignorant safety. Even if it means they're unprepared when that safety ends. Even then, they stood in comfortable silence, the morning sun warming the kitchen. Outside, birds sang. Inside, Lysander dozed in Mara's arms, his breathing soft and even. He's sleeping better, Mara observed. The last 2 nights, he went almost 6 hours. Because you're here. Your presence stabilizes him. Draven's voice held wonder. He's never slept more than 2 hours at a stretch before. I'd almost forgotten what a full night's rest felt like. You don't sleep much anyway, do you? Vampires need less than humans. But I do sleep.
Just
lightly. Always listening in case he needs me. Mara understood that bone-deep exhaustion. She'd seen it in parents at her school, the ones with special needs children who required constant vigilance. The love that never rested. Why don't you sleep now, she suggested. Really sleep. I'll watch him. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. She settled into the rocking chair by the window, Lysander secure in her arms. We still have a day before the council meeting, right? You should be rested for that. Draven hesitated. She could see him warring with instinct, the need to always be on guard, always vigilant. Finally, exhaustion won.
2 hours, he said.
Wake me if anything seems wrong. Deal. He disappeared upstairs. Mara heard a door close, then silence. She looked down at Lysander, whose violet eyes were open now, watching her with that uncanny focus. Just you and me, kiddo, she whispered. Her hands began moving through signs automatically, but this time, she recognized them from the memory echoes, a story sign sequence her ancestors had used. The tale of a child born in winter who learned to love the cold. Lysander's eyes tracked every gesture, absorbing, learning. And in the back of Mara's mind, she felt something like approval. Not from Draven, not from Lysander. From the long line of women who'd come before her, who'd carried this knowledge through centuries, waiting for the moment someone would need it again. We remember, the echoes seemed to whisper. And now, so do you? Mara rocked slowly, signing stories in a language older than nations, while upstairs a 400-year-old vampire finally slept without fear. The council meeting was tomorrow. But today, in this quiet morning, they were just a makeshift family learning what it meant to trust each other. It was enough. The obsidian citadel wasn't what Mara expected. She'd imagined something gothic, gargoyles and torchlit corridors, maybe bats. Instead, the Virginia estate looked like a modern corporate headquarters disguised as a historic mansion. All clean lines, security checkpoints, and vampires in business suits checking tablets. "This is your capital?" she murmured as they passed through the third metal detector. "We evolved." Draven adjusted Lysander in his arms. The castle aesthetic was too conspicuous. "This looks like a private think tank. No one questions it." They were escorted through marble hallways by a vampire woman who introduced herself as Celine, Draven's cousin. She had sharp features, ice blonde hair, and eyes that assessed Mara like a potential investment. "So you're the Chen descendant," Celine said. "I admit, I didn't believe it when Draven sent word. We all thought that bloodline was extinct." "Surprise," Mara said weakly. Indeed, Celine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "The council is divided about your presence. Some see it as providence. Others see complications. Which side are you on?" "The side that wants my cousin's heir to survive and thrive. Everything else is politics." She stopped before massive double doors. "They're waiting inside. Let me do the talking initially. Some of these vampires are older than most human civilizations, and they have very particular ideas about protocol." The doors opened onto a throne room that definitely leaned gothic. Vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows filtering colored light, and a semicircle of ornate chairs where 7 vampires sat in formal arrangement. They all turned to look at Mara simultaneously. The weight of their attention was crushing. These weren't just vampires. They were ancient, powerful, and examining her like scientists studying a rare specimen. Draven stepped forward, Lysander in his arms. "Council members, I present Mara Chen, confirmed descendant of the Chen caretaker line. She carries the ancestral knowledge and has demonstrated the ability to bond with my heir." A vampire who looked like a stern grandmother, though Mara suspected she was probably 1,000 years old, leaned forward. "Demonstrate." "I'm sorry," Mara said. "If you truly carry caretaker knowledge, demonstrate it. Now." Draven's jaw tightened. "Counselor Evangeline, she's not a performing. She's making an extraordinary claim. Another vampire, this one a thin man with gold rings on every finger, interrupted. "We're entitled to proof." Mara felt her temper flare. She'd been chased by hunters, driven through 3 states, and had genetic memories randomly surfacing in her brain. She wasn't about to be treated like a circus act. But then Lysander whimpered, picking up on the tension. "Fine. If they wanted proof, she'd give them proof." Mara took Lysander from Draven's arms. The baby immediately reached for her, his small hands grasping. She settled him against her shoulder and began signing with her free hand. But not the simple calming sequence. This was something that had surfaced in her memory echoes this morning. The presentation rite, a formal introduction used when caretakers first met council members. Her hands moved through complex patterns, each gesture precise and deliberate. "I stand before the old blood. I carry the knowledge of those who came before. I speak the language of silent protection. I am guardian, teacher, shield. I claim no power but service. I ask no reward but the trust of those I protect." The room went absolutely silent. Lysander watched her hands, his violet eyes wide and focused. Then, impossibly, his own tiny hands began to move, clumsy, uncoordinated, but unmistakably trying to mimic her gestures. "Merciful dark," someone whispered. Evangeline stood up, her expression transformed. "That's the presentation rite. We haven't seen that performed in 3 centuries. How?" "She didn't learn it from books," Draven said quietly. "The knowledge is surfacing naturally. Memory echoes." "Impossible," the man with gold ring said. But his voice held wonder. not skepticism. A third vampire, younger looking with kind eyes, smiled. Not impossible. Miraculous. Do you know what this means? We could rebuild the caretaker system. Train new guardians. Finally give our children the care they deserve. Or, a cold voice said from the shadows, we could be inviting a security risk into the heart of our society. Everyone turned. A vampire stepped into the light, tall, dark-haired, with eyes like winter frost. Everything about him radiated danger. Lord Victor, Draven said tightly. Always a pleasure. Is it?
Victor circled Mara slowly, evaluating.
A human appears out of nowhere, knowing secrets that should be lost. She just happens to sit near you on a plane. Just happens to have the exact skills your heir needs. And we're supposed to believe this is coincidence. The hunters attacked her. Draven countered. They identified her as a threat to them. That alone should tell you. It tells me she's connected to hunter networks. Perhaps she's a plant. An infiltrator designed to get close to the royal heir. Mara's temper snapped. You think I'm a spy? I'm a teaching assistant from Boston who grades papers and helps kids learn to read. 3 days ago, I didn't even know vampires existed. I've been shot at, chased through alleys, and had my entire worldview exploded. So forgive me if I'm not particularly interested in your paranoid conspiracy theories. The room went deathly quiet. Victor's eyes narrowed. You dare speak to a council member? She dares speak truth. Evangeline's voice cut through the tension. I've lived long enough to recognize genuine confusion when I see it. This girl is no spy, Victor. She's exactly what she appears to be, a miracle we don't deserve. A miracle that could influence the future king, Victor shot back. She'll have unprecedented access to the heir. What's to stop her from shaping his beliefs, his loyalties? From turning him against vampire interests? What's to stop you from being a paranoid jackass? Mara retorted before she could stop herself. Draven made a choking sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Victor's expression went icy. I propose a vote. The human remains under strict supervision, with limited access to the heir, until we can verify her loyalty. I propose an alternative, the kind-eyed vampire said. We restore the ancient protocols. Give her the title formally, with all the protections and responsibilities that entails. Make her part of our society, officially. Seconded. Evangeline said immediately. Victor's jaw clenched. You're giving a human power over our future. You'll regret this. Perhaps, Evangeline said. But I'd rather regret trust than regret cruelty. We destroyed the caretakers once through fear. I won't make that mistake again. She stood, her formal robes sweeping the floor. I call for a vote. All in favor of formally recognizing Mara Chun as guardian of the silent heir, with all traditional rights and protections. For hands went up. 4 out of 7. The motion carries. Evangeline's smile was genuine. Welcome to the Citadel, Guardian Chen. May your service be long and your purpose clear. Victor stood abruptly and left without another word. Draven moved to Mara's side, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. You've made an enemy. I've made several, apparently. Mara looked down at Lysander, who was drowsing contentedly. But I made some allies too. The most dangerous politics in the world, Draven murmured, is vampire politics. Lucky me. Outside the throne room, Mara could hear Victor's voice speaking urgently to someone. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. Threat. Problem. Eliminate. She held Lysander a little tighter. The real battle, she realized, was just beginning. Mara's new quarters in the Citadel were luxurious and suffocating in equal measure. The suite was beautiful, sitting room, bedroom, private bath, and a nursery alcove for Lysander. Antique furniture, silk curtains, fresh flowers delivered daily. But the windows didn't open, and there was always a guard outside her door. For her protection, they said. She wasn't sure she believed that. It was day 7 since the council meeting, and Mara was beginning to understand the cage she'd walked into. Every morning, vampire nobility came to observe her with Lysander. They watched her sign, asked intrusive questions, took notes. She was a curiosity, a resource, a thing to be studied. Not a person. Guardian Chen, Lord Armand wishes to know the genealogy of your maternal line, a vampire secretary said, tablet in hand.
This was the 4th interview today.
Tell Lord Armand, he can look it up himself, Mara said tiredly. She was rocking Lysander, who'd been fussy all morning. I'm not a database. But the historical records are incomplete. Then they stay incomplete, Mara met her eyes. I'm done answering questions today. Please leave. The secretary looked affronted, but departed. The door closed with a soft click, and Mara heard the lock engage from outside. Always locked. For her protection. She pressed her forehead against Lysander's, feeling tears burn behind her eyes. What did I get us into, baby? Lysander reached up, his small hand patting her cheek. The gesture was so clearly meant to comfort that Mara nearly broke down completely. A knock at the door. Mara tensed, but then Draven's voice came through. It's me. May I enter? It's not like I can unlock it from inside. She heard him speak to the guard. Then the lock clicked. Draven entered, and for the first time since they'd arrived, he looked as exhausted as she felt. I'm sorry, he said without preamble. This isn't what I wanted for you. What did you want? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you brought me here to be a glorified nanny that everyone can gawk at. Draven flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? Mara stood, still holding Lysander. I haven't been outside in a week. I can't leave without an escort. People I've never met keep asking about my family, my grandmother, like I'm some kind of historical artifact. And Victor. She stopped, swallowing hard. Victor's people follow me everywhere. I see them watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. I know. I'm trying to. To what? Protect me? Mara laughed bitterly. I don't feel protected, Draven. I feel owned. The word hung between them, sharp and accusatory. Draven's expression crumbled. He moved to the window, staring out at the manicured grounds. When I asked you to come to the Citadel, I thought they would welcome you, honor you. I was a fool. So what now? I'm stuck here forever? This is my life now, locked rooms and invasive questions and guards who report my every move. No, Draven turned back to her, something hard in his voice. You're not a prisoner. If you want to leave, I'll arrange it. Tonight, if necessary. I'll provide protection, resources, a new identity. You can go back to your life. Mara's breath caught. What about Lysander? Draven's voice broke slightly. He'll suffer without you. But he suffered before you came. We'll manage somehow. Lysander made a distressed sound, as if understanding. His hands clutched at Mara's shirt, and she felt his fear through their empathic bond. Not fear of pain. Fear of abandonment. That's not fair, Mara whispered. Using him too. I'm not using him. I'm giving you a choice. Draven's eyes were anguished. A real choice, not the false one I offered before. You deserve freedom, Mara. Even if it costs us everything. Mara looked down at Lysander, the baby who'd smiled for her, who slept peacefully in her arms, who was learning to sign simple words now. Hungry, tired, happy. She thought about her apartment in Boston, her students, her normal life. The coffee shops and grading papers and Friday nights with friends. Simple. Safe. Her own. Then she thought about walking away from this child who trusted her completely. I don't want to leave him, she said quietly. But I don't want to be a servant either. I don't want to be locked in beautiful rooms and paraded in front of nobles who see me as a tool. Then what do you want? Respect. Agency. To be treated as an equal, not a resource. She met his eyes. Can you give me that? Yes, no hesitation. Starting now. You're not a prisoner. You're a guardian with full rights under ancient law. That means access to anywhere in the Citadel. Freedom to come and go. A voice in decisions about Lysander's care and education. And Victor? His people? I'll handle Victor. Steel entered Draven's voice. He doesn't dictate policy to the king. You're the king? Technically. I prefer to rule by consensus, but I can pull rank when necessary. He moved closer. Mara, I need you to understand something. I don't want you here as a servant. He stopped, seeming to choose words carefully. I want a partner in raising my son. Someone who cares about his well-being, not about political advantage. Someone I can trust. Do you trust me? More than almost anyone in this building. The honesty in his voice hit her hard. Mara realized she trusted him too, despite everything. He'd protected her from hunters, shown her the truth about her heritage, and just now offered her freedom, even though it would hurt him. Okay, she said finally. I'll stay. But things change. No more interviews without my consent. No more locked doors. And I want to help with more than just Lysander. I want to understand this world, learn its politics, meet people on my own terms. Done. Draven smiled, relief flooding his features. Starting tomorrow, we'll. Starting now, Mara interrupted. Right now, I want to walk in the gardens. Outside. With Lysander. Without guards hovering. There are security concerns. Then you come with us. But I'm not staying in this room another minute. Draven studied her, then bowed slightly, that formal gesture she'd seen before. But this time it felt different. Like genuine respect. As you wish, Guardian Chen. They walked through the Citadel corridors together, Mara carrying Lysander while Draven dismissed protesting guards with curt words. The evening air was cool when they emerged into the gardens, carrying the scent of jasmine and cut grass. Lysander's eyes went wide, taking in the open sky and moving trees. He's never been outside much, has he? Mara asked. I was afraid. The sunlight doesn't hurt vampire children as much as adults, but I worried. Draven trailed off. I worried about everything. Maybe too much. Fear makes us small, Mara said, remembering something her grandmother used to say. Love should make us brave. They walked in silence for a while, Lysander fascinated by the gardens. Mara signed descriptions of what he was sensing: wind, flowers, growing things. The baby's hands tried to copy her, learning. Thank you, Draven said quietly. For staying. For giving this a chance. Thank you for treating me like a person, not a possession. Always. His hand briefly touched her shoulder, warm and solid. We're in this together now. Partners. Partners, Mara agreed. Above them, in a third-floor window, Victor watched the scene with cold calculation. And in his office, he drafted a message to his most trusted hunter contact. The human has the heir's complete trust. She won't leave willingly. Alternative solutions required. But in the garden, Mara and Draven walked with Lysander between them, a makeshift family learning what it meant to choose each other. And for that moment, it was enough. The attack came on night 10, during the Blood Moon Festival. The Citadel was full of vampire nobility celebrating an ancient holiday. Music, dancing, formal toasts. Draven had invited Mara to attend, but she'd declined. Too many people, too many eyes. Instead, she'd stayed in her quarters with Lysander, teaching him new signs by lamplight. She was showing him the gesture for stars when the window exploded inward. Mara threw herself over Lysander instinctively, shielding him with her body as glass rained down. She felt sharp pain across her shoulder. A cut, not deep but bleeding. Then someone was in the room, moving with hunter speed and precision. Get the child, a voice commanded. Kill the woman. Mara didn't think. She grabbed Lysander and ran for the door, her bare feet crunching on broken glass. Behind her, she heard more hunters entering through the window. At least 3, maybe more. The door was locked from outside. Of course it was. For her protection. She spun, pressing her back against the wood. Lysander clutched to her chest. 3 hunters faced her, 2 men and a woman, all armed with silver blades that gleamed in the lamplight. Hand over the air, the woman said. She was young, maybe 30, with cold eyes. Make this easy. No, Mara's voice shook, but she didn't move. Then die. The hunter lunged forward. Mara's body moved before her mind could catch up, muscle memory from the echoes, ancestral knowledge surfacing. She dropped low, twisted sideways, using the hunter's momentum against her. The blade missed by inches. But there were 3 of them, and only one of her, and she was human, and they were enhanced and armed. She was going to die. But not him. She thought fiercely, holding Lysander tighter. Not him. Her hands moved through signs she'd never consciously learned. The caretaker's shielding rite, an ancient gesture meant to protect vampire children in moments of extreme danger. It was supposed to be symbolic, spiritual. It wasn't. Light erupted from Lysander. Pure, brilliant, silver-white. The hunters screamed, throwing up their arms. The light didn't hurt them physically, but it was wrong for them, disorienting, repelling them like opposite magnets. And in that moment of confusion, the door behind Mara exploded outward. Draven stood in the doorway, and he was nothing like the careful father she'd come to know. This was the Vampire King. 4 centuries of power and rage given form. His eyes were solid black, fangs fully extended, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. You, he said, voice like death itself. Touch my family. He moved. Mara had seen him fight before, but not like this. This wasn't fighting, it was annihilation. The first hunter didn't even have time to scream. The second tried to run, and made it 3 steps. The third, the woman with cold eyes, actually managed to raise her blade. It didn't matter. 15 seconds, and all 3 hunters were on the ground, alive but broken and unconscious. Draven crossed to Mara immediately, his hands gentle despite the violence he'd just committed. Are you hurt? Is Lysander. We're okay. I'm okay. Mara was shaking, adrenaline crashing through her. How did they get in? The security was compromised. Celine appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. They had inside help. Someone disabled the wards on your windows specifically. Victor, Draven said, his voice arctic. We don't have proof. We don't need proof, he turned to Celine. Lock down the citadel. No one leaves. And bring Victor to the throne room.
Now.
More vampires were arriving. Guards, council members, nobles drawn by the commotion. They all stopped when they saw the scene. The broken hunters. The shattered window. Mara with Lysander, both of them glowing faintly with residual silver light. Evangeline pushed through the crowd, her expression horrified. The child did that? That light. The Guardian did it, Draven said firmly. Using the shielding rite. Protecting my heir as is her sacred duty. He looked at Mara when he said it, and she understood. He was making a statement, establishing her importance in front of everyone. This is unacceptable, Evangeline said, fury in her voice. Hunters inside the citadel? Someone will answer for this. They moved the gathering to the throne room, the whole chaotic mass of vampires, with Mara and Lysander at the center. Someone found Mara's shoes and bandaged her shoulder. Draven stayed at her side the entire time, a solid presence. Victor was brought in by guards, his expression carefully neutral. What is the meaning of? Hunters attacked the Guardian and my heir, Draven interrupted, his voice carrying through the chamber. In the citadel. In her quarters. With the security wards disabled from inside. A tragedy, Victor said smoothly. But hardly my responsibility. Security is Celine's domain. The wards were disabled using your authorization code, Celine said coldly. We found the logs. Victor's mask slipped for just a moment. That proves nothing. Codes can be stolen. We also found your communications, Draven said. With known hunter contacts. Discussing alternative solutions to the Guardian problem. The throne room erupted in shocked murmurs. Victor's expression hardened. Everything I did was for vampire security. This human has unprecedented influence over the air. She's a vulnerability we cannot afford. She's a guardian, Evangeline said sharply. Protected by ancient law. You violated the most sacred covenant of our people. I protected our future. You tried to murder a child, Draven said quietly. Dangerously. My child. That's not protection. That's treason. Victor looked around the room, seeing no allies. His hand moved toward his coat, reaching for a weapon, maybe, or an escape tool. He never made it. Draven moved with that terrible speed, pinning Victor against the wall. You have two choices. Face judgment from this council, which will likely mean execution. Or exile, permanent, binding, never to return to vampire society.
Exile, Victor's pet.
I'll take exile. But mark my words, Ashford, you'll regret protecting that human. She'll be your downfall. Maybe, Draven said. But she'll also be my son's salvation. I'll take that trade. Victor was removed by guards, still hurling threats and warnings. The council convened quickly, voting unanimously for permanent exile with blood binding to ensure compliance. When it was finally over, when the throne room emptied and quiet returned, Mara found herself sitting on the steps to the throne with Lysander in her lap. Draven sat beside her, looking as exhausted as she felt. That light, she said quietly. What was that? The shielding rite. Legend said it could manifest physically in times of desperate need, but I'd never seen it. He looked at Lysander, who was drowsing peacefully, completely unaware of the chaos he'd helped create. You saved him. We saved him, Mara corrected. I did the right, you did the fighting. Partners, remember? Partners, Draven smiled faintly. Though you're a partner who glows silver when protecting my heir, that's going to cause interesting political discussions. Can't wait. Mara leaned her head on his shoulder, too tired to worry about propriety. Is it always this dramatic in vampire society? Usually worse, actually. This was relatively contained. Fantastic. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Lysander stirred, his small hands moving through a sign Mara had taught him yesterday. Safe. Yeah, baby, Mara whispered, signing back. Safe now. We're all safe. And in that moment, in the quiet aftermath of violence, Mara realized something. She wasn't a prisoner here. She wasn't a servant or a tool. She was exactly what Draven had called her. Family. Strange, complicated, occasionally life-threatening family. But family nonetheless. Outside, in the forest beyond the citadel walls, Victor watched the building with hatred burning in his chest. He'd lost this battle. But the war was far from over. For days after the attack, Mara stood in a part of the citadel she'd never seen before. The royal nursery wing had been abandoned for 300 years, Draven explained as they walked through dusty corridors. After the massacre, no one had the heart to restore it. It became a memorial of sorts, a reminder of what was lost. Now it was being restored. Mara watched workers carefully cleaning centuries-old murals that depicted vampire children at play, caretakers teaching and guiding. The same scenes she'd seen in the hidden archive, but brighter, more alive. These walls had witnessed joy once. They would again. The council voted unanimously, Draven said, guiding her to the central chamber. This wing belongs to you now. Your residence, your domain.
No locked doors.
No guards unless you request them. The room took Mara's breath away. Massive windows overlooking gardens, hand-carved furniture being uncovered and polished, and in the center, a restored nursery with a crib that looked like it had been crafted by master artisans. Draven, this is too much. It's not enough, he set Lysander down in a playpen filled with soft toys. But it's a start. The council wants to make clear that guardians are honored here. Essential. Never to be threatened or diminished again. Mara moved through the room slowly, touching restored murals, running her hands over silk curtains that had just been hung. And the other vampire families? The ones with children? Already making inquiries, Draven smiled. Turns out having a functional guardian creates quite a bit of interest. Evangeline suggested we might start a training program, find others with potential caretaker aptitude, teach them what you know. I'm still learning what I know. Then we'll learn together. He moved to stand beside her at the window. Mara, I need to ask you something. And I need you to answer honestly. The seriousness in his tone made her turn to face him fully. Are you happy here? He asked quietly. Not content, not resigned, actually happy. Mara considered the question carefully. She thought about the past 2 weeks, the fear, the confusion, the attacks, but also the moments of peace. Teaching Lysander new signs and watching his vocabulary grow. Walking gardens with Draven while discussing vampire history and human teaching methods. Finding unexpected friendship with Celine and even stern Evangeline. I'm not unhappy, she said finally. I miss my old life sometimes. My students, my routine. But I don't regret being here. That's not the same as being happy. No, she agreed. But happiness isn't instant. It's built. Day by day, choice by choice. She looked at Lysander, who was babbling softly to himself while playing. I think I could be happy here. I think I'm already starting to be. Relief washed over Draven's face.
Good.
Because we have a ceremony to prepare for. Ceremony? Your formal installation as guardian of the silent air. 3 days from now, in front of the full court, he pulled a small box from his pocket. Which means you'll need this. He opened the box to reveal a pendant, her grandmother's pendant, the one she'd left behind in Boston. The circular design with intricate knotwork that matched the mural in the hidden archive. How did you? I had someone retrieve it from your apartment, along with some of your other belongings, books, photos, clothes. They're being delivered later today, his expression softened. I can't give you back your old life, Mara, but I can make sure pieces of it come with you into this new 1 inch. Mara's throat tightened. She took the pendant, feeling the familiar weight of it, the worn silver warm in her hand. Thank you. Will you let me? Draven gestured to the clasp. She nodded, turning so he could fasten it around her neck. His fingers were gentle against her skin, careful not to catch her hair. When she turned back, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You look like her, he said softly.
Chen Mei.
In the paintings. Same determination. Same strength. I'm terrified most of the time. So was she. But she carried the knowledge anyway. Saved it. Passed it down through generations until it found its way back to where it was needed, he smiled. That's not weakness. That's courage. Lysander made a demanding sound, his hands moving through signs.
Up.
Want up. Mara laughed, going to him immediately. Someone's getting bossy with his vocabulary. She lifted him, and Lysander immediately began signing more.
Happy.
Home. Yes. Mara signed back, feeling truth in the gestures. Home. She looked around the restored nursery, at the murals depicting caretakers and children, at the windows letting in afternoon light, at Draven watching them both with unguarded affection. This wasn't the life she'd planned. Wasn't the future she'd imagined when she boarded that red-eye flight from Seattle. But it was hers now. Built from impossible coincidence and ancient bloodlines, from a baby's cry and a stranger's desperate need. Built from choices made in fear and trust given despite danger. Thank you, she said to Draven, for not giving up on finding a caretaker for him. For not giving up on me when I was difficult. You weren't difficult. You were right. He moved closer, his hand resting gently on Lysander's dark hair. About everything. I needed a partner, not a servant. Lysander needed a guardian, not a prisoner forced to care for him. And what do you need? The question slipped out before Mara could stop it. Draven was quiet for a long moment, his eyes meeting hers over Lysander's head. I need to know my son is loved. Protected. That he'll grow up with someone who sees him as a child first and an heir second. And I think I need someone I can trust completely in a world full of politics and lies. That's a lot of responsibility. It is. But you're already carrying it, his smile was gentle. You have been since the moment you stood up on that airplane and decided a stranger's baby deserved help. Lysander yawned, snuggling against Mara's shoulder. His small hand found the pendant at her throat, fingers tracing the familiar knotwork pattern. And Mara realized her grandmother had been right all along. The signs were their family's gift. Not just the hand gestures, but the deeper meaning, showing children they're not alone in the silence. Building bridges across impossible distances. Her grandmother had carried that gift through darkness, through danger, through generations of hiding and waiting. Now Mara would carry it into light. "When's the ceremony?" she asked. 3 days. Full formal affair. All the council, noble families, probably half the vampire population on the East Coast. Draven grimaced. "Very dramatic. Lots of speeches." "Sounds terrible." "Completely. But necessary." He touched her shoulder briefly. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready. We can wait, take more time." "No." Mara looked down at Lysander, who was drowsing peacefully in her arms. "We've waited 300 years already. Time to make it official." 3 days later, Mara stood in the restored throne room wearing formal robes in deep blue, the traditional color of caretakers, Celine had explained. The Chun pendant hung at her throat, catching light. The room was packed with vampires, all watching as Evangeline spoke the ancient words in a language Mara didn't know but somehow understood anyway. The memory echoes, guiding her even now. When Evangeline finished, Draven stepped forward with Lysander in his arms. The baby was dressed in miniature formal wear, looking impossibly tiny and solemn. "Lysander Ashford, Crown Prince of the Eastern Courts," Draven's voice carried through the chamber. "I present to you Mara Chen, guardian of the silent air, protector,
Teacher.
heart of the future king." He placed Lysander in Mara's arms. The baby looked up at her with those impossible violet eyes. Then his small hands moved through signs, clumsy still, but clear. "Love you. Home." Mara's eyes burned with tears. She signed back, her hands steady despite everything. "Love you. Always home." The throne room erupted in applause, vampires acknowledging, accepting, welcoming. And in that moment, Mara understood what her grandmother had known all along. Family wasn't blood or species, or even shared history. Family was choice, was showing up, was signing "I see you" across all the silences between. Outside, in the restored gardens, cherry blossoms were blooming out of season. Inside, a makeshift family stood together. Vampire King, human guardian, and the silent heir who would someday change everything. It wasn't the ending anyone expected, but it was the beginning they all needed. And for the first time in 300 years, the royal nursery wing was filled with light and laughter and the sound of a child who finally felt at peace. "Home," Lysander signed again, his small face content. "Yes," Mara whispered, holding him close. "Home." And she meant it.